Welcome to the True North Compliance Podcast, where we discuss regulatory and compliance issues for Canadian business.
Hello, I'm Sean O'Hara, and thanks for listening. My guest today is Kelly Kurta. With her husband, Rory, they founded KMAC Services, Inc., which runs Sidney Street Market, Candy Cane Lane, which is the Christmas craft show, and they work with the Port Sidney Marina running their dockside nights. And they help other businesses put on events like staff appreciation events, barbecues, luncheons. They worked with HBL events to run Hockey Day in Canada, Century Celebration, and Touchdown Pacific. Kelly is also the executive director of the Greater Victoria Festival Society, which runs the Victoria Day Parade, Santa Claus Parade, which happened recently since we're recording this at the beginning of January, Wicked Victoria, and the St. Patrick's Family Fun Day, which will be coming up in March. Kelly is also part of the Events Safety Alliance Canada, and she champions free, family-friendly festivals as important economic drivers and cultural traditions for Greater Victoria. In recent years, Kelly has been a leading voice on the rising costs of logistics, traffic control, marshals, safety planning, and insurance that now dominate event budgets. She is actively seeking new funding partnerships and more collaborative approaches to event safety so these community celebrations can continue. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Sean.
Tell me about the Greater Victoria Festival Society, what they do, and why they matter to the region.
Well, the Greater Victoria Festival Society was incorporated in March of 1992. And we were the umbrella society that sort of oversaw all of the festivals in Greater Victoria. Over the years and the decades, many more event organizations have come up, which is amazing. So we're a community-based, nonprofit, charitable organization that we produce medium to large inclusive festivals, parades, and public gatherings across Greater Victoria. So our role is part cultural programming, part major project logistics. We bring together performers, local makers, community organizations, sponsors, municipal partners, and volunteers to create welcoming events that people can access for free or by donation. And they matter because we create shared experiences that build our community pride, our sense of belonging, and we generate real economic activity. We bring tens of thousands of people downtown or into a community area, and that supports local businesses, restaurants, hotels, artists, vendors, seasonal employment, transportation, accommodation. So beyond the day of the event, it strengthens the region's reputation as a vibrant place to live, visit, and invest.
Right, because they're in spending and they're partaking, and it's building up a culture and helping to build a culture.
Correct.
That's great. At the Sidney Breakfast Club, where we first met, that John Jurisic facilitates, one of the panel discussions was talking about businesses investing, and one of the things they look at is culture, and Victoria isn't considered a place with a rich culture, a lot of performing arts and so on, for businesses to want to invest, plus the lack of doctors and the cost of housing. So events that your organizations are putting on are helping to build that culture, which is good and helpful.
Most definitely. We are starting to really showcase our cultural vibrancy in Greater Victoria and throughout Southern Vancouver Island, for sure.
So with these events, what are some of the, let's say, the regulations or the compliance pieces that most people might be surprised about, or what are some of the issues that you need to deal with? Like in the past few years, the increase in security and your role in the Event Safety Alliance Canada.
Most people, they see the parade or the market day or the festival or the concert, but they don't see the months of the compliance behind it, for sure. And some of those invisible pieces include traffic management plans, emergency access requirements, crowd management, security planning, our medical response needs that we have to have at our events. the fire safety and tent approvals. All of our tents that we have for our markets are all fire retardant now. Food safety rules for vendors have changed with VHA over the last 3 years significantly. And which is great, because as market managers or festival producers, we now have an obligation to VHA and to our vendors to ensure that we are compliant as well. Electrical inspections, noise bylaws, and then there's accessibility planning. We want to make sure that the events are inclusive for everybody. And of course, the documentation that ties it all together, that takes hours and hours. The paperwork is always a lot. And then, some of the other key elements are stakeholder requirements. I mean, our city departments, our police, fire, bylaws, public works, the roads and engineering, sometimes provincial agencies. In the last ensuing years, and for the Victoria Day Parade, we've had to work with the provincial government on the highways with regards to the parade. And of course, each have their own standards and their own timelines as to when you have to submit, how soon prior. So it's a professional level of risk management, and it's essential, but it's definitely not visible to the public.
For compliance, like you and all the documentation, you've got to, what do you need to prove that everything is ready? Or is it if something goes wrong that you had everything in place, or a bit of both?
Bit of both. Definitely both. The baseline expectation for mitigation has increased, and definitely the cost of delivering it has as well. We submit a permit 4 to 5 months prior to the event, and that's the city permit. And then, we have our insurance costs. What our insurance covers has changed over the last, since COVID, basically. Pre-COVID, it was most people could get insurance for events fairly easily, and it's not like that anymore.
What's changed in the insurance?
I don't know if it was just the shutting down of, like, when COVID happened. I know when we spoke to our original insurance company prior to COVID, the biggest question was, do we keep our insurance? We're not doing any events, so why should we have insurance? And the feedback at that time was, no, definitely keep the insurance, because it'll mitigate the cost when you come back to doing events. That didn't happen. Our insurance, just as an example, went from about $4,000 to $16,000 after COVID.
4,000 to 16,000. So that's what, 4 times more.
Yeah. So now we've changed companies, and we work with an amazing insurance company, and it's part and parcel. So they partly sponsor it, and we partly pay for the other part. And we've been able to reduce it somewhat from that 16,000, not to 4, but it's come down a few $1,000s. So that's been great. And they've been great to work with. It was See First when I started with them about 3 years ago, that's since changed to Waypoint and is now Navicord.
Yeah, that big shift for them. Yes, I know some people within there are going through that. So that's great.
Yeah, they've been great to work with.
Yeah. And also a local, as See First, a very local community company. So they were reinforcing that by supporting these events.
Yes. And we actually met through a local organization. We met through Think Local First, which is a great organization to be a part of here in Victoria. And, we just started talking about insurance, and now we're partners. So it's great.
Oh, excellent. What are some of I'm curious about the VHA requirements with food.
So most of what that is, it's VHA ensuring that the vendors are compliant. Most people have to produce out of a commercial kitchen. There are some products that are allowed to be made in your own home kitchen, but it's, you're producing out of a commercial kitchen. It's pH requirements for jams or salsas or things like that. And it's also a tabulation of who is at your market. So as a market manager now, we have a responsibility to VHA to supply them with all of our vendors, food vendors that are going to be at our market. And if they're high risk, low risk, if they're food trucks. And then, of course, with the food trucks also comes the certification with the fire department. They have to make sure that they've got fire suppression systems, or it's quite ironic. I mean, a couple of years ago when we did the Sidney market, I think I must have sent out multiple emails and phone calls saying, you need to phone Sidney Fire. You need to phone Sidney Fire. And sure enough, like half a dozen of them didn't. And come the day of the first market, one of them was shut down. So their fire extinguisher was like 10 years old. And it's little things like that that people forget. The vendors they're so good and they're so great to work with. And VHA has been great too. One of the things that we do for the Sidney market is we actually before the market starts, so usually in March or April, we'll ask VHA representative to do a seminar or a workshop with us and with our food vendors so that they know what their expectations are. And a couple of them, it helped tremendously. They said it was absolutely fabulous. I think we had about 25 or so on our call last year. And that just ensures that, they understand, I understand as a market manager, because things change all the time. So it's important that we have all the updated and we're educated on what's coming up.
And that's more reassuring for people, less chance of food poisoning and everything else happening.
Very true.
Okay, good. Because I know some people are leery. They just don't know if there's any standards, but that is a good to know thing. Getting to security and a increased police presence that some people have noticed at events, how has that a recent thing, or how is that affecting the industry?
Events now require more formalized safety planning, more trained personnel, more robust infrastructure. When route changes happen and security requirements increase, we now have additional marshals, more traffic control. We have fencing now, more signage, more equipment. It has increased, and I think it will continue to increase. It's risk mitigation. I think it's an important part of major events, for sure. When regulations are well intended, the operational impact is real. Like we can't just draw our maps anymore. We need certified control professional plan development, category 2 maps that show where we need our traffic marshals, and it's hard because I find it very hard because, so many of our events relied on volunteers. And as much as we still rely on volunteers moving forward, as many volunteers that we had, we need twice as many trained professionals now.
Do they train security people, or I guess volunteers that are now trained? How does that work?
Both. One of the things that the Greater Victoria Festival Society is doing, and we're very proud of this, is we are putting together training workshops for our volunteers and for our part-time staff. For example, we have disability inclusion and awareness training, and it's through the Disability Resource Center, and that's going to be our first workshop coming up at the end of January, and it's full. We will be doing another one, but then we're also going to be doing training with crowd management. We're going to be doing, at the Santa Claus Parade this year, we did hire a security company. We partnered with Inder from Western Canada Security. He came out with 7 or 8 members of his team, and they will be our partners moving forward as well at our events. So it's a shared responsibility, so we'll have, as the operational impact is significant. And, and with our police force and that, it's tough. I mean, I know that they're strapped with their police officers and trying to staff, just every shift that they have. So it's our responsibility as event professionals to ensure that we also have trained people on our end. It certainly won't be, we will have our security professionals. We work with Go Traffic. So we have all of their traffic control professionals that are all trained through Universal and Go Traffic. But it is definitely, a shared responsibility between the event professionals and the city and the police force.
With the police force, who picks? Like, do you go and say, I need 500 bodies for this and I need 5 tanks? Or
No,
who decides?
the police force does. Victoria City Police does. We also, when we do the Sidney Street Market, we meet regularly, probably every quarter, and we discuss, what the needs are for the Sidney Street Market. It seems, very minimal, but it's actually, the operational impact is very significant there. We have vehicle mitigation on all of our side streets. At the Sidney Street Market, we work very closely with the RCMP. All of our staff is They will be getting training in 2026 on vehicle mitigation. And as you mentioned earlier, I'm fortunate enough to be a member of the Event Safety Alliance Canada, and we meet monthly and we have conferences annually that we attend.
Well, that sounds like it has quite the price, the insurance, all of the security, and they're not volunteering their time and their effort. So how does that affect the cost of these events? Where does the money come from, and how does that affect events in general?
That's a very good question. And that we've been hearing that has cost some events to unfortunately not be able to happen. And that's the reality of where we sit right now. Compliance and safety costs are often the first costs that we can't wish away. We can't skip a traffic control plan or insurance or trained leadership. So those costs influence everything downstream. How many vendors we can include. We can be very creative as event producers. So, increasing our vendors, we want to keep our vendor fees and how we structure it. We want to keep it so that, we want to be able to subsidize community groups. Like my goal was always to offer free entry to nonprofits into the parades. And that's just not feasible anymore. But it definitely affects how we structure our vendor fees. We try hard to keep our events accessible and community focused, but the reality is, like you mentioned, when the costs rise, as they have significantly, it puts pressure on our vendor pricing, our sponsorship targets, and our fundraising. And the balancing act is, we're trying to maintain high standards, but protecting affordability for our local makers and families. So, it's really tough. Like the change in our recent Santa Claus parade, it's a beautiful route down Government, Wharf, and Johnson. I mean, Lojo is one of the prettiest streets in Victoria at Christmas time. But the operational impact of the Festival Society was about $16,000 that we had not planned for. It's still tough because now moving forward to Victoria Day, as we see Victoria Day that we'll be taking the same route, we now have to factor in that and possibly additional costs because we may need additional fencing or additional traffic control.
That means, too, with some nonprofits now being charged, they may not be able to participate.
That is correct.
We do get frequent reminders from not just around the world, but also fairly locally or in this part of the world that these measures are needed.
They are. Yeah, I mean, it's the reality of the times now. Festivals are complex and they have several layers that are very deep, and those costs continue to rise. And we hope that we can reach out to our sponsors. I've definitely spoken to a couple of mine and they've been great. A couple of them have said, absolutely, ask for this. We're going to do our best. But we are in need of more. The Victoria Day Parade and the Santa Claus Parade no longer receive funding from the BC Fairs and Festivals after their change last year. So that was something that came about. The BC Fairs and Festivals, it was initiated by an event planner, amazing event planner here on Vancouver Island. And it was a great support through COVID. Without that funding, I'm not sure how many of us would have survived. And then following COVID, when we came back for a couple of years, the BC Fairs and Festivals continued to provide that funding. And then last year, they changed their requirements and they have excluded parades, saying that they are not economic drivers. That was the email that I received.
They're not economic drivers. That's
correct.
Oh.
However,
yeah, that seems curious because when I've been to parades, usually I eat somewhere.
Yeah, or you travel from somewhere.
Yes.
We have a great support from Destination Greater Victoria. We're members with them. And we had one of their business research and analytics specialists provide an economic impact study for Victoria Day for 2025. And just some fun numbers for our 125th anniversary. Our economic impact was $6.524 million. Contributions to personal income, wages, and salaries was $2.269 million. Jobs that were directly or indirectly supported from our parade was 3,574, which equates to about 45 full-time jobs, and a contribution to federal, provincial, and municipal taxes of almost $1.3 million. That's a pretty significant economic impact.
Yes, those numbers, it would make a lot of sense to invest and to encourage.
Yes. Well, and it's great because we also we also see about 80,000 people, spectators, that are on the streets during the Victoria Day Parade. That may be somewhat impacted this year because the parade's changed routes and we will be heading down Wharf Street. But, I think that, being along the water will be a beautiful opportunity. We love our American bands, and, we encourage and support them to come back to Victoria. Last year, we definitely saw a drop because of some of the tariff impacts and that were happening, but they're excited to come back. So, we have to find the funding somehow. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. So for sponsorship that you look for, what do the sponsors get? If that's a good question.
They get me.
Okay.
It's lots. So we do have our two naming sponsors for our Victoria Day Parade and our Santa Claus Parade, those of which are Thrifty Foods for the Victoria Day Parade and Peninsula Co-op for the Santa Claus Parade, and incredible community partners. Our presenting sponsor the last couple of years for all of our events has been Czech Media, which we are grateful to them. Dodds Furniture and Mattress sponsors our One World Cultural Festival, which happens on the Saturday of the Victoria Day long weekend. And that has grown exponentially in the last 2 years. And we also have some quiet funders, those being, the nonprofits that work with us in kind. We have the Disability Resource Center that we work with, the Francophone Society that we work with, the Bastion Square Revitalization Association that we work with. City of Victoria does sponsor our parades, both with cash and their policing and traffic costs and waste management for our events. And but we are looking for more. And we can custom any of our sponsorships. We can, work with the companies to, create something that works with them, whether that's an activation on site, whether that's something behind the scenes, whether it's a volunteer sponsorship, perhaps it's an accessibility and inclusive sponsorship because we have an accessibility and a live audio description area for our Santa Claus Parade and our Victoria Day Parade, which is phenomenal. So we have lots of opportunities available, and I'm happy to have a coffee and sit down and discuss them.
So it could be cash, materials, people.
Yes. Bodies.
Bodies.
Yeah. And after following COVID, our volunteer, I've found, and just talking with other event planners and stuff, we found that some of our volunteers have dwindled in the last few years. And now organizations that are volunteering, there's honorariums that are being offered to them for their volunteering, which is not necessarily in the true spirit of volunteering, but we do understand it because everybody's trying to raise money and time is valuable these days. So, sometimes it's just a group coming out to volunteer, and not requiring an honorarium, things like that.
Oh, an honorarium from the society for their contributions?
Correct.
Oh,
Correct.
I see. Okay, so
Yeah.
if they say we'll supply 50 bodies and you give us a certain amount of money, and then that gets their, I guess it helps build the spirit and the enthusiasm for their group within their own members, plus you get bodies and they get some money. Okay.
Yes. And bodies are great because bodies are very impactful at events. And, we have a wonderful core volunteer group, and we have a wonderful event team too that will help train them. We always make sure that we have one of our event team with our volunteers so that they understand what to do. And if they have questions, they can ask and they don't feel that they're sort of left out there in the cold.
If people are interested in volunteering, what do you look for and what do they do?
I look for just passionate people. I love people. I love working with people that love events. Somebody said to me many years ago that you volunteer for the things that you love to do, that you wish you could do as a job. And I'm living proof of that. I worked in transportation and logistics for 25 years over in Vancouver before I moved home. And I volunteered with Ronald McDonald House. I volunteered with my daughter's pony club. I volunteered with multiple organizations and still do to this day with the Esquimalt Lion Club, who are amazing marshals. They've been marshals of our parade for over 3 decades. I moved home 14 years ago to doing what I love to do, that I used to volunteer for. And now I do what I love to do. So, between running the events and helping organizations fundraise and stuff. So we look for people they're passionate. They want to have fun. We love having fun. We do make sure they all have hand warmers for the Santa Claus parade, things like that, and coffee and snacks. But yeah, they do everything from marshaling, staging our entries to assisting our vendors setting up. We love when we work with our vendors. I'm so appreciative of our local business community, and I'm jealous of the fact that our local makers are so talented because I am not. And so, and I see them and, they're hauling in their tents and they're hauling in their tables. And so our volunteers, we get them to help with that. So it makes them feel at ease too. And we've developed a really good group that our vendors are comfortable with. They like having that additional help because it gives them that additional time to set up. We do sometimes get help to work with our staging when we do our shows and our performances through the One World Cultural Festival and our St. Patrick's Day and our Wicked Victoria. But yeah, our volunteers, it's been great. We have volunteers that help at our VIP area, volunteers that help at our accessibility area, and then our volunteer marshals along the parade routes. And they are with our traffic control personnel.
Which would be either the police or the security or Go Traffic.
They won't be with the police, but they will be with universal traffic control personnel, and they can be with our security team.
So they're not left alone.
They're not left alone.
If something happens, there's a professional there. They're just like an extra set of eyes, too.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what kind of rules or guidelines do you need to pay attention to, like around sponsorship categories, alcohol-related sponsors, cannabis, maybe political messaging for these events?
That's a great question, Sean. So we have to be consistent about our sponsorship categories, exclusivity, brand usage, logos, naming rights, how partners are represented across signage, digital, and broadcast. And we work very closely with them to make sure that we give them the value that they feel that they need within our events. For certain categories like alcohol and cannabis, there are additional rules around where and how messaging can appear, especially if the event is family focused. So we do tend to stay away from those two categories because of our events are so family focused. And we keep a very clear standard around political messaging. So our events are community-wide and inclusive, and we focus on the cultural celebration and the civic pride, not the partisan promotion. So that helps protect the integrity of our event and ensures that the space feels welcoming to everyone. Political messaging can sway people from coming to the events, and we don't want that to happen.
That's an understatement that it can sway them or discourage them. Is there a particular regulation or a permit process or even a compliance requirement that's either challenging or outdated? And how does that affect your day-to-day operations?
One of the biggest challenges is when processes are not aligned to the realities of event planning timelines that we work through. Festivals are complex, and when approvals and route changes or requirements shift late, it creates major cost and communication impacts. So the intent of regulation is safety, and we support that. But the systems need to work with our nonprofits who are delivering these events for the public's benefit. Consistency, predictable timelines, and cleaner coordination would make a huge difference. There are many times when, we'll submit our permits, but we won't get information back until we've already actually put out a communication plan. And so what that does is it sidelines everything that we've done, and it increases the cost because we have to redo it all over again.
This is from the various government levels, or would you say?
Well, it was this year specifically, it was from the level. Unfortunately, we had about 7 weeks on notice of the change for our Santa Claus parade route this year. It definitely was inconvenient, but more so, it was financially challenging. We understand their need to reduce the operational impact, but that reduction for them sent us $16,000 in unanticipated costs with additional traffic control, new equipment and fencing, revised traffic management plans, and most importantly, I think, was our communications. We had sent out communications. We have a notification letter that goes out, and we'd sent that out to a huge majority of our database, probably the end of September. Since COVID, we've tried to do it a couple months ahead of time. Our hotels, our transportation partners, like Wilson's Transportation, or Black Ball Ferry, BC Ferries, things like that. So people know, so that they can also let their customers know, right? As well as the care homes and things like that around Victoria, and all of our entertainment facilities, our restaurants, our hospitality, so they can plan for staffing and things like that. So the re-advertising and the resubmission of our communications to everybody came again at a very late time. That affected many of our stakeholders, for sure. And I think that's a really big thing. All we're really asking for is to have frequent table talks leading up to the event. It took significant time on my part to redo all these plans with the shortened timeline. And these aren't the only events that I do. So it affected the other events. So, nonprofits can't absorb sudden 5-figure cost increases on fixed budgets that are already too small. So the expectation that a community nonprofit should simply pay the difference, I don't feel is reasonable or sustainable.
Right. Yeah, especially for the tinier nonprofits who are drawing a lot of their resources from their members.
Yeah.
Plus fulfilling everything else that they do as a nonprofit.
Exactly.
Do you know what caused the route change?
My understanding was operational impact and safety. We were advised that the new route they felt was a safer route, and that it would reduce the operational impact for the city and the police department. That was my understanding.
I guess attendees, what's the route switch so they don't set up their chairs in the wrong spot?
The route switch will definitely be, and I think this is the way Victoria Day is going to go. We just had our debrief from the Santa Claus parade, which was good. So I think we're going to be marshalling around the Parliament buildings, exactly how we do for the Santa Claus parade. It'll step off at Belleville and Government Street. It'll head north on Government, and then it'll turn left onto Wharf Street. Then we'll head east on Johnson, and we'll disperse north on Government Street by Chatham area. That's the current plan. That could change.
It's the Victoria Day Parade.
That is the new Victoria Day Parade, yes.
Because it used to start at Mayfair.
It has started at Mayfair for over 40 years, yes.
Is this the first year of the shortened route?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like I missed something.
No, and there's, again, when we talk about layers, there's definitely a lot of layers for Victoria Day. So there's our American bands who are wide. They are definitely wide. So I've been talking with them and hoping that they can march down Wharf Street. That's my goal. Wharf is the narrowest of the streets. So we'll see how that goes. And then we also have the Douglas Mile, which, I love it. I think it's great. We've done it for, I think, 5 years now. And our team at the Festival Society got more involved this year. So the Douglas Mile used to start at Burnside and Douglas. and it would start around 8:40 in the morning and just run to Pandora. It was 1 mile race. And the first couple of years, we raised a few $1,000s and stuff, and it was for the Parkinson's Wellness Group of Victoria. And this past year, very exciting, we raised over $110,000. So that was actually one of my biggest concerns with the route change is how do we accommodate the Douglas Mile? My understanding during our debrief at the Santa Claus Parade with the city is that we are speaking with Arts and Culture, and they did say that they've measured the route, and it does sound like the route is exactly 1 mile. So we are going to make it work. That money is very important to that organization, and I don't want to see them lose it. So yeah, it's going to be different, but it's still the Victoria Day Parade. It's still going to be great. It's going to be great that people are downtown with all the local restaurants that are downtown and that. I think, I've been looking at it because it was a big change for us because we have our reviewing stand, which is normally right at Centennial Square. We have the military is amazing, and they work with us, and they set up a section of about 200 chairs and an area where wheelchairs can be set up. And then on the other side, we have our accessibility area with our live audio description. So that area will be interesting to try and figure out where we're going to set up and how we're going to do that placement, because we judge the American bands because they accumulate points for the other parades that they do. So that'll be an interesting one. But, I think as far as the impact on some of the tourism places, I think it'll be a positive impact. The Inner Harbor is beautiful, as we know. So, yeah.
Be interesting to see the overall economic impact, because we would always go as close to the start coming in from the West Shore for the people who don't know Victoria. But anyway, too bad I can't draw a map here. But close to where it started because it was easy to get to and then easy to leave and not have to go directly downtown. And we would also plot whatever restaurant that year we would stop at to pick up breakfast to get to a good spot early. So that'll be different.
Yes, I have to agree with you on that. I do know that many people that have spoken to, they come in from Up Island, from Colwood, from the peninsula, and they are very similar to you. They go to the beginning of the parade and they'll park, in behind Burnside or the old Canadian Tire up on Douglas, and they'll get their tents and their chairs and their breakfast, and, they're there at 7:00 in the morning. I see them every year. So I do think that will definitely have some impact on our attendance, which could definitely impact the economic value of the parade, but I hope it doesn't. I truly hope that people embrace the new route and they come down and they try, or they take public transit, park on the other side of the Blue Bridge and walk over, things like that. So that's going to be some of our communications going out. We've got a rigorous plan to put out some early communication in February and March about the parade and where it's going to be. But we're hoping that the businesses downtown will also come on side with us and help us market it, because it's a great opportunity to go into some of the local restaurants of that downtown.
One of those things to do it and see the impact. And even the merchants or the restaurants that used to be along the route, if they say, hey, what happened? May was used to be one day the month of that one day was a great event, and see their impact. And if they complain or have issues, contrasted with how much is spent downtown or less.
Well, I know I was also speaking with my good friend. He's general manager at Mayfair, and he was saying that he was disappointed that it wasn't going to be there this year, because it's kind of their thing. It's always been, the food court will be open and, people will go in there, and, we've had a great run. It's been a great run. The Ruby, that's another one by the Hotel Z. Of course, before Denny's no longer was there, we always used to buy breakfast for our marshals at Denny's.
Yep.
But I know there's lots of places along the route where people, would stop and, they'd grab breakfast, and the families would meet, the cousins would meet, and, you'd see the group of 30 there with their 10 by 10 tents. And I've actually seen some propane heaters.
Well, we'll see. I guess that's what we have to do. Change something, see if it works better. Great. If it doesn't, can we switch back and go from there?
Well, and that's the question, right? So,
Yep.
I mean, if it doesn't work, I mean, do we want to, we had the conversation like, what if the bands can't make it work,
It,
And I would hate to see those American bands not come up here because it's been a rite of passage for the seniors for many, many years. Even when I marched in the band with Dave Dunnett at Oak Bay High School, way, way back at 86, 85, it was a rite of passage for the grade 11 and 12 students. And we've watched some amazing connections between our Canadian bands and our American bands. And they work together now a lot throughout the year. And then they come together at the Victoria Day Parade weekend when they do their parade of bands on the Sunday and their drum battle. And, it's like they're all friends. So it's definitely going to be impactful. We're gonna hope for the best and promote that. I mean, it's still an incredible weekend. The One World Cultural Festival that Gordy Dodd sponsors, like I said, has grown significantly in the last 2 years. So we close down Belleville Street on the Saturday, and we have vendors and food trucks, and then we have a full cultural performance from 11 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night up on the Parliament buildings on the Saturday. So it's a great time. There's bouncy castles and face painting, and again, it's all free. It's all local performers, and it's all free. And that's something that we really, really work hard and are proud of, is that we support our local artists and our musicians. And we love getting them out in front of the public, and they do a great job of performing.
we'll have to put as much as we can of that, or at least links into the show notes for anybody listening. Since this is only audio, they can go on their app, click through to the show notes to access those events. And if they're outside of Victoria, then they can pick a time to come visit.
Yes. Yes. And we get a lot of that. There are a lot of, hotels are probably almost, I would say fully booked by now for the May long weekend.
Yeah, that's neat. There's been some chatter or question or concerns going around that major funding and RFPs, which are requests for proposals, that they're going to the major event organizers and that nonprofits are receiving smaller funding or are just declined for additional funding. So is that really happening, or can you clarify what I've been hearing?
Yeah. So it seems like we've been seeing that over the last couple of years. Nonprofits are professional event producers. We operate under the same and sometimes even stricter safety, insurance, compliance, and risk management requirements as for any for-profit company. We're coordinating with police, fire, bylaw, engineering, accessibility, sponsors, volunteers, and we're delivering free and low-cost public access versus the for-profits that are charging ticket prices and things like that. And the bigger picture, I saw it and was speaking with the Victoria Foundation, their Architects of Belonging Civil Society Impact Study. So the charitable and nonprofit sector here in Greater Victoria generates $5.4 billion in economic activity. And that's an increase of over $1 billion a year since 2018. Supporting over 60,000 jobs, contributing, I think it's 350 or 360 million in municipal taxes annually. So the idea that nonprofits are small operators just isn't true. We are builders of belonging, of social well-being, and real economic infrastructure. And I personally work with many nonprofit producers of events that are exceptional, talented, educated. The challenge is that when large RFPs and major funding streams are reserved only for the professionals, it ignores the fact that our nonprofits are already delivering professional grade, high risk, high impact public events, but we're being asked to absorb the rising safety and compliance costs without any support. And that's the tough part, is that we're still paying all the costs for the risk management, for the mitigation, for the safety. I was speaking with the BC Fairs and Festivals to say that a parade is not an economic driver, and now they've changed the modeling so that the event must be $100,000 or more to receive funding from the BC Fairs and Festivals. Not all events are 100,000 or more. So my hope, my true hope for 2026 and moving forward is that our governments and our funders will start to recognize nonprofits, not as, I guess, hobbyists or side project organizers, but actually as essential civic partners who deliver billions of dollars in public value every single year. And we work collaboratively with each other. And that's one of the things that we've started to do more and more. I know I have personally, and the other nonprofits that I work with, we collaborate together, we cross-promote each other, we're trying to find the ideas within ourselves to see how we can be better. We're always looking to do better, but we do need the funding. And without that support in the funding, whether it's municipally or regionally or federally, we're going to see a lot of community organizations disappear.
That would be sad. That's like tearing up the tapestry.
Well, it's kind of like ripping up the foundation of Victoria. I mean, Victoria has always been a city of festivals. I remember years, going back to the 80s, we had, the Festival Society started the onshore activities for the Swift Shore way back when. We used to do the lighted boat parade in the Inner Harbor. There was a Miss Snowflake and Master Jack Frost contest with the elementary schools at the malls. And it would drive people to the malls throughout November. We used to do the teacup races in the Inner Harbor. We used to do, what's the other ones? I think they were like the longboat or longboard canoe races. There were so many events and it was great. Of course, you remember our incredible folk festival that we used to have. Like, we were the city of festivals, and, losing track of our nonprofits that have consistently and have always been there, and they've always continued to provide these festivals for everybody. If we lose that, we're losing the heart of who we are.
That would be sad. I had forgotten about a big chunk of those too. That's one chunk of your life, I guess, Kelly, dealing with the Greater Victoria Festival Society. So tell me about KMAC services, what you do, and those types of events and so on.
KMAC Services was born probably 25 years ago, I think, when I was working in transportation and logistics. That was my original career. And we worked in trucking and transportation, and it was my husband and I, and we named it after our girl. And when we moved back home to Victoria in 2014 and built bowling alleys all under the KMAC umbrella, we thought it would sort of taper off, and it didn't. More and more people started asking us to do events and to help them fundraise and to work on capital campaigns. And so it just grew. So right now we're in the process of finishing our website. And so we offer a lot of different services, everything from like small staff appreciation days to a Christmas party, to an Easter party, to the Sidney street market, which, we love working with the town of Sidney. And, we secured the contract for 2 years with an additional 2 times 2. So 6 years working with them, and we've loved every minute of it. We have about 160 vendors at our Sidney street market and like an international food truck festival. So it's a great time to come down for dinner on a Thursday night. And then, we'll do corporate retreats if people want them. We had the pleasure of working with Port Sidney Marina, and we created just a real cool vibe down in Sidney. It's like an extension of the Sidney street market. So it's dockside nights. And it was a small curated market right on the docks, in Port Sidney at the marina, which many people thought was a private dock, and myself included. And we turned it into one heck of a fun Friday night. Port Sidney is part of the Mill Bay Marine Group, and their Adventure Co. platform. And so we've had a lot of fun. We get local musicians to come down on Friday nights, and they perform from 5 to 8 o'clock. Anybody and everybody is welcome. This year, we've got a couple things in the works for it, which will be a little bit exciting. You can grab a hot dog or a burger from our food partner down there. And I think this year you might be able to grab a beer as well, which would be great. We've been very lucky. What we thought was going to be a lead into retirement when we moved home has turned into a whole different number of branches of just connecting with community. And that's what we do, connecting and talking with the community and helping the community. That's what my mother and my grandparents did. And so I'm proud to be a part of that as well.
Do you have any upcoming dates you want to share?
March 15th is our St. Patrick's Festival in downtown Victoria. And we've got over 90 vendors, which is great. And it was such a pleasure. The Consulate of Ireland from Vancouver reached out to us, and they're looking at coming over and having a look at what we do because they've seen it and they love the St. Patrick's Festival.
You said the Consulate of Ireland.
Yes.
For St. Patrick. So that's quite the endorsement.
It is quite the endorsement. I am very proud. I was very excited when Kathy and her team reached out, and I'm extremely excited to possibly collaborate with them in 2027 for an event on the other side of the water.
That'll be big. And other events coming up?
Yeah, so May 16th to 18th is our Victoria Day weekend. The Saturday is our One World Cultural Festival at the Parliament Buildings. Sunday is our parade of bands at our drum battle. And then, of course, Monday morning, bright and early, is our Victoria Day parade. We're super excited about that. And then June 4th is the opening of the Sidney Street Market from 5:30 to 8:30 every Thursday night on Beacon Avenue until September the 10th. And then the last Sunday in October is our Wicked Victoria. It'll be our 11th year. And I still remember the day when I met with Trina Notman, and she created Victoria Boo when we still had tours of Victoria. And they wanted to create a festival for the shoulder season in October. And so we came up with Wicked Victoria. And it's been great. And then, of course, the last Saturday in November is our annual, much-loved Santa Claus Parade, where we kick off Christmas on the West Coast. And I shouldn't say that because I do have to give kudos. The kickoff to Christmas on the West Coast is definitely the Ladysmith Light Up. So shout out to them. They're amazing. And what I love so much about the Christmas time is that I think we have, I don't know, I'm probably going to miss some, but I think we have 6 or 7 parades in the course of 2 weeks. Everything from the Ladysmith Light Up, there's a Campbell River Parade, we have the Santa Claus Parade in Victoria, and then we have the Sidney Sparkles Parade. We have the Esquimalt Celebrations of Light. Souk has a parade. So I don't know. If parades aren't economic drivers, I'm not sure what is, because everybody is at a parade for 2 full weeks at Christmas time.
For tourists who want to, at least in the rest of Canada, who want to avoid the snow, can come here because it's rare that we have snow or even ice for these parades.
That is very true. Yes. I think there was one year where it did start snowing and the crowd erupted in jubilation. And my good friend Wendy at the IEO truck parade, that is also a favorite parade of mine, where they raise thousands and thousands for the food banks. But yeah, there's nothing quite like standing on the corner in downtown Victoria with 50 or 60,000 people on the streets, and Santa and Mrs. Claus are singing "Here Comes Santa Claus," and so are all the people that are watching.
Neat. Wow. Sounds like you do a lot of fun stuff.
I do. It is fun. And I keep reminding myself of that when it gets hard.
Just before we wrap up, Kelly, when you think about the long-term vision for the Greater Victoria Festival Society, what does a sustainable, compliant, and vibrant festival landscape look like?
To me, Sean, sustainability means that we can deliver safe events without pricing out local makers, families, or community groups. Somehow we have to figure out how to make these affordable. A vibrant festival landscape is inclusive. It's culturally respectful. It's economically meaningful. Events need to remain free and affordable, where local businesses, tourism, and community well-being all benefit. And to get there, we need predictable processes, municipally, regionally, fair and realistic funding for the true costs of safety and compliance, and committed partnerships from our businesses and sponsors who see festivals as essential community infrastructure, because that's what they are. The Victoria Day Parade is one of the foundations that built tourism in Greater Victoria. And we need the community to keep showing up, because attendance, volunteerism, and local pride are what make these events worth protecting. And more so than anything, the integrity and the sustainability of these events are ultimately what our goal is at the Festival Society.
As you were saying earlier, for one of them, 1.3 million in taxes is a huge driver. And
It's a huge driver.
And not that
Yeah.
we love paying taxes, but that's certainly an encouragement for government support at all levels.
I think so. Sometimes there's, I see, and I mean, it's all public knowledge, where funding goes from our municipal governments and our regional governments. But I really think they need to look at the actual economic impacts of some of the events that our nonprofits are doing. I love all of the things that we do in Victoria. I love Rifflandia. I love Sunfest. But we really need to look at where the money is, where the economic impact is happening. And I think that needs to be a consideration, and it needs to be a measurable consideration so that it's fair across the board.
Be a whole other discussion, paid and unpaid, or the cost of paid events, and how that impacts security and affects those costs and so on. But that would be another time.
Yes.
So just very briefly, too, you mentioned KMAC. Can you touch on just some of the events that you've done, sort of a plug for that side of your life?
Yes. So I have a great friend who is an incredible event producer, Heidi Barlow-Lee from HBL Events. And last year, actually, I guess 2 years ago now, she invited me to join her to help produce the Hockey Day in Canada, the Touchdown Pacific with the BC Lions, and then finally Century Celebration last year, celebrating the Victoria Cougars' 100th year anniversary of the win. And Hockey Day in Canada did win Canadian Event of the Year. We had the pleasure of a few of us going back to Toronto and experiencing that, which was great to see little Victoria up there getting some events. And we have many other incredible event producers on the island here who were at that and who won some awards, which was great to see. We do the Sidney Street Market. We do Dockside Nights, Candy Cane Lane Christmas Craft Show and Festival we do at the Saanich Fairgrounds. We also manage all of the parking for the last 2 years at the Saanich Fair, which has been exceptional. We have an incredible team. They're very well trained, and we work very closely with the traffic control personnel that the Saanich Fairgrounds work with as well. And working with the Saanich Fairground team has been truly amazing. We consult on fundraising or capital campaigns for nonprofit organizations. We have run golf tournaments. I was also the chair of the Ronald McDonald House Golf Tournament for 10 years here on Vancouver Island, bringing it from $27,000 to $250,000. So in our 10 years, we raised about $1.2 million for the charity. We just love what we do. We have fun.
Oh, that's excellent. How can people get a hold of you, either for KMAC or for the Greater Victoria Festival Society?
They can email me through the Festival Society website, or they can email me at kelkurta @gmail.com. We are in the process of finishing our website. The sky's the limit, I guess, for 2026.
Good. And we'll put that into the show notes. Thank you so much. So my guest has been Kelly Kurta, who runs KMAC Services, running a variety of events, and is also the executive director of the Greater Victoria Festival Society, running events including the Victoria Day Parade and the Santa Claus Parade and many others. So thank you so much for being here, Kelly.
Thank you, Sean. It's been such a pleasure. And I guess I will see you at the next Sidney breakfast meeting.
Yes. And that's a wrap.